The year was 1884, and the town of Redstone Creek slept under a sky the color of whiskey and sorrow. The desert wind had long since buried its mercy beneath the sand. Out on the horizon, a lone wagon creaked along the road, half broken and covered in dust. Inside sat a woman, her wedding dress torn, her eyes hollow, and in her trembling arms, a baby that wouldn't stop crying. Her name was Clara Mayfield, and once, she'd believed in promises. But promises don't mean much when the man who made them rides off before the wedding bells ever ring. The horse pulling her wagon limped with exhaustion, its steps uneven in the dry road. Clara's lips were cracked from thirst, her hands blistered from holding the reins too tight. She didn't know where she was headed, only that she was leaving behind the worst kind of pain a woman can know, being left to face the world alone, with a child who never asked to bear her shame. The baby's cry softened to a whimper, and Clara whispered, "Hush now, sweetheart. We'll find a place, I promise. Somewhere kind. Somewhere that doesn't judge." As the sun began to fall behind the canyon's edge, a storm of dust rose from the west. She pulled the blanket tighter around the child and squinted through the orange haze. A shape was coming closer, a rider. Tall in the saddle, dark hat pulled low, his coat whipping in the wind. He slowed as he approached her wagon, eyes sharp yet calm. When he spoke, his voice was steady, like a river that had seen too many storms. "Evenin', ma'am. You lookin' for trouble, or tryin' to outrun it?" Clara swallowed hard. "Just lookin' for mercy, mister. Ain't had much luck findin' it lately." The man tilted his hat back just enough for her to see his eyes, a stormy gray, touched by something she couldn't name. "Name's Cole Thatcher," he said. "I run a small ranch about 10 miles north. Ain't much, but it's dry and safe. You and the little one could rest there if you've a mind to." Clara hesitated. The world had taken her trust and buried it deep. But something in his voice, quiet, patient, unforced, told her this cowboy wasn't the kind of man who took advantage of the broken. "I ain't got money," she whispered. Cole nodded. "Didn't ask for any. Just seems wrong leavin' a mother and child to the wolves." The wind howled through the canyon like a warning, but Clara saw no danger in him, only a man shaped by silence and scars. She nodded slowly. "All right then," she said. "But just till the baby's strong again." Cole looked at her, then the baby, then back at her again. "Ma'am," he said softly, "sometimes home ain't a place you plan on stayin'. Sometimes it finds you when you're too tired to run." He helped her down from the wagon. For the first time in weeks, Clara's knees buckled, not from fear, but from the strange relief of not being alone anymore. The storm rolled behind them as they rode toward his ranch, the last light of day fading like a memory too heavy to carry. The baby slept against her chest, and Clara dared a small, fragile thought. Maybe, just maybe, the worst was over. But in the West, peace never comes without a test. And neither Clara nor Cole knew that mercy had its own kind of price. The road to Cole Thatcher's ranch was long and silent, save for the low groan of the wagon wheels and the occasional cry of a coyote in the hills. The moon had begun to rise, pale and watchful, lighting their way across the rugged land. Clara sat beside Cole on his horse-drawn cart now, her baby nestled in her arms, wrapped in the only blanket she had left. Cole rode steady, guiding the reins like a man who'd spent his life talking to horses more than people. His movements were calm, deliberate, not the kind of calm that comes from peace, but the kind that comes from surviving storms. "You live out here alone?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mostly," Cole replied. "Got a few ranch hands come by when work piles up. But for the most part, it's just me and the land." She nodded, staring out at the endless horizon. "Ain't it lonely?" He smiled faintly. "It was. Then again, I learned the land listens better than most folks do." Clara almost smiled at that almost. But the ache in her chest didn't let her. The sound of the baby's soft breathing was the only reminder that life still had meaning. The night air bit at her cheeks, and she pulled the blanket tighter around her child. When they finally reached Cole's ranch, she was too tired to speak. The house was small, built from sun-bleached wood and stone, with a porch that faced the open plains. A single lantern glowed in the window, casting warm light across the dust. Cole helped her down from the cart. "Ain't fancy," he said. "But it's dry, and the fire's still going." Clara stepped inside, her eyes sweeping the modest space. A sturdy table, a few chairs, a worn Bible on the mantel. The air smelled of smoke, pine, and something else, safety. She hadn't known that scent in a long time. Cole set her small bag on the table and gestured toward the fire. "Sit. Warm yourself. I'll fetch some water." Clara eased into a chair, rocking the baby gently. The child stirred but didn't cry. Her heart felt strange, caught between gratitude and fear. Men who showed kindness were rare. Men who didn't want anything in return were rarer still. Cole returned with a basin and a folded towel. "Ain't much," he said, setting it near the hearth. "But it'll do for now." She looked up at him, studying the way the firelight touched his face, rough, honest, the kind of face carved by sun and time. "You didn't have to stop for me," she said softly. He shrugged. "Maybe not. But I figure there are too many folks who turn away when they shouldn't. The world doesn't need more of that." Her throat tightened. "You talk like a preacher." Cole smiled a little. "Nah. I just talk like a man who's seen what happens when kindness runs out." They didn't speak for a while after that. The fire popped quietly, shadows dancing on the walls. Clara laid her baby in a small basket near the hearth and pulled her hands close to the warmth. For the first time in months, her bones stopped shaking. Cole busied himself making coffee, the kind strong enough to wake the dead. He poured a cup for her, sliding it gently across the table. "Ain't sweet," he said. "Ran out of sugar last week." Clara took a sip anyway, grimacing at the bitterness. "It's perfect," she said, and for a moment, they shared the ghost of a smile. Cole leaned back in his chair, studying her without prying. "If you don't mind me a skin, what are you running from?" Clara stared into her cup, her voice quiet but firm. "A promise that turned to shame. A man who said he'd marry me once the season turned. He left before the first snow fell. Never looked back." Cole nodded slowly, not pushing her further. "Then he doesn't deserve to be remembered." She looked up, eyes glistening. "Maybe not. But his memory still follows me. Every mile." "Then let it fade here," Cole said, his tone soft but steady. "Ain't no shame in startin' over. Not in this house." The baby whimpered softly. Clara rose, cradled her child, and rocked gently by the fire. Cole watched quietly, something unspoken stirring in his chest. A memory, maybe, or a longing he thought he'd buried long ago. When she caught him looking, he turned away quickly, pretending to fix the kettle. She smiled faintly, whispering, "Thank you, Mr. Thatcher." He shook his head. "Cole's fine. Ain't nobody called me Mr. since my pa was alive." "Then thank you, Cole," she said, "for giving us a place, even if it's just for tonight." He met her eyes then, and for the briefest moment, something passed between them, quiet, raw, and fragile. The kind of thing that starts small but grows roots if you let it. Cole nodded once. "Ain't no rule sayin' you gotta leave come mornin'." Outside, the wind sighed through the grass, carrying the scent of rain and hope. And though neither of them said it out loud, both knew that night had changed everything. Morning came soft and golden over Redstone Creek, spilling light through the cabin window like a blessing Clara wasn't sure she deserved. For the first time in months, she woke to the sound of birds instead of wheels, wind, or her own sobbing. The fire had died low, but warmth still lingered in the air. Her baby slept soundly, cheeks pink, tiny fists tucked close to its chin. She blinked, momentarily forgetting where she was, then the smell of coffee and bacon reached her, and memory caught up. Cole Thatcher's ranch. Safety. Kindness. A place she hadn't expected to find. Outside, she could hear the rhythmic sounds of a man who belonged to the land, boots on soil, the low nicker of horses, a gate creaking open. She pushed herself up slowly, every muscle sore from weeks of running. When she stepped out onto the porch, the world looked brand new. The sun stretched wide over the plains, brushing gold across the tall grass. The air smelled like dust, hay, and second chances. Cole was already out by the corral, sleeves rolled up, hat low, moving with the kind of quiet grace only cowboys seem born with. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Mornin'," he called, voice rough from the wind but somehow gentle. Clara smiled faintly. "Mornin'. Didn't mean to sleep so late." "You earned it," he said, tossing a handful of feed toward a brown mare. "Didn't figure you'd had much rest lately." She hesitated before walking closer. "Your place. It's peaceful. Can't remember the last time I saw land that looked like it forgave people." Cole chuckled softly. "Land doesn't hold grudges, Clara. People do. That's why I stay out here." For a moment, they just stood there, watching the horses eat. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was something warmer, like two broken things quietly recognizing each other. He finally said, "There's bread and bacon inside, if you're hungry. Fixed a bit for you and the little one." She looked at him, surprised. "You cook?" "I get by," he said with a small grin. "Figured you didn't ride all this way to do chores on your first mornin'. Her lips curved upward for the first time, a soft, unsure smile. "You'd be surprised what I've had to do lately." Cole tilted his head, studying her face. "Ain't much surprises me anymore." Back inside, Clara found the table set with simple food, a plate of bacon, coarse bread, and a jar of wild honey. The baby stirred, so she rocked the child with one hand while eating with the other. Each bite tasted like home, though she couldn't remember what home even felt like anymore. Cole came in a few minutes later, brushing the dust from his hands. "You eat all right?" She nodded. "Better than I have in weeks." "Good," he said. "You can stay here as long as you need. Ain't no one gonna bother you on my land." Her eyes lifted sharply. "You don't even know me." Cole paused, then leaned against the doorframe. "Don't need to. I know what hurt looks like. And I know when a person's just trying to breathe again." Those words hit her deeper than she wanted them to. Clara looked away, blinking fast. "I don't want to be trouble." "You ain't," he said simply. "Sometimes, the Lord sends folks to your door for a reason. Don't always make sense right away." She looked down at her child. "I stopped believin' the Lord was listenin' a long time ago." Cole's tone softened. "Then maybe he sent you here so you'd start again." The room fell quiet. Outside, wind moved through the tall grass, whispering like an old friend. The baby giggled suddenly, a small, bright sound that cut through the heaviness like sunlight breaking clouds. Cole's eyes softened as he watched. "What's the little one's name?" he asked. "Grace," Clara said, smiling faintly. "Though some days I think she's got more strength than Grace." Cole knelt slightly beside the cradle, careful not to get too close. "Grace, huh? That's a name that carries weight. She's lucky to have you." Clara swallowed hard. "I don't always feel like she is." He looked up at her then, steady, unwavering. "You're still here. You keep going. That's more than most would have done." Something in his voice made her chest tighten. She turned away before he could see the tears in her eyes. "Maybe I could help around here," she said after a moment. "Clean, cook, whatever needs doing. Cole nodded thoughtfully. "If that makes you feel useful, I won't stop you. But you ain't got to earn a place here, Clara. Not with me." She froze for a heartbeat. The words were simple, but they felt like a door opening. For the first time since she'd been abandoned, she didn't feel like a burden. The baby laughed again, and Cole smiled, a real one this time. "Reckon she likes the sound of peace," he said. "Or maybe," Clara whispered, "she just knows when she's finally safe." Days turned into a quiet kind of rhythm out at Redstone Creek. Morning sun spilled over the ranch each day like mercy, and Clara found herself waking up before dawn, not because fear shook her from sleep, but because peace, strange and new, invited her to greet the day. She would set a small kettle on the fire, humming softly while Grace cooed in the cradle. Cole would already be outside, tending to his horses, the air alive with the sound of hooves against the dirt and his low voice talking to them like they were old friends. It had been weeks since Clara arrived, but each morning still carried a whisper of disbelief. That someone had opened their door. That someone had said, "Come warm by my fire and mend it." She helped where she could, washing clothes, feeding chickens, mending things that had been left untouched since Cole's mother passed years ago. The cabin began to feel lived in again. Curtains washed, floor swept, the smell of bread baking in the air. It was as if her presence brought color back into a place that had forgotten it. Cole didn't say much, but he noticed everything. How her hands trembled less now when she poured coffee. How she laughed softly when Grace reached for her hat. How her eyes, once guarded, shadowed, had started to hold light again. One afternoon, as the sun slipped behind the cottonwoods, Clara carried a pail of water from the well. Cole was mending a fence nearby, shirt sleeves rolled up, sweat shining on his forearms. The sight of him, sturdy, steady, grounded, did something to her heart she didn't have words for. "Fence still givin' you trouble?" she asked, setting the bucket down. He looked up, squinting in the sunlight. "It's like some folks," he said with a grin. "Always breakin' in the same places." She smiled faintly. "You ever think maybe it's not the fence's fault?" Cole chuckled low. "You callin' me stubborn, Miss Clara?" "If the nail fits," she teased back. That made him laugh, a sound deep and rough, the kind of laugh that felt earned. She hadn't heard it before, but she liked the way it filled the air between them. Grace started crying from the porch then, and Clara turned to go, but Cole stopped her gently. "I'll get her." She hesitated, surprised. "You sure?" He nodded. "Ain't the first baby I've held. My sister had 2 back before she moved east." He lifted Grace carefully, his big hands somehow tender as they cradled her small frame. She quieted almost instantly, tiny fingers curling around the edge of his shirt. Clara watched him from a few feet away. The sight of that strong man holding her child so softly stirred something fierce and fragile inside her. "She likes you," Clara said quietly. Cole smiled down at the baby. "Guess she's got good sense." The moment lingered, sunlight on his face, her heart beating faster than it should. She looked away quickly, busying herself with the pail again, but the feeling stayed. It was like watching winter melt. Later that night, after supper, Cole sat by the fire cleaning his rifle while Clara rocked Grace to sleep. The flames flickered across their faces, painting them in gold and shadow. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked softly. He glanced up. "Used to. Back when I thought there was something worth finding out there. Now, I figure the world's big enough to come to you if you wait long enough." Clara looked at him for a long moment. "Maybe it already has." The room went quiet. He didn't look away this time. After a while, Cole spoke again, his voice low, steady. "You ever gonna tell me what sent you running, Clara?" She stared into the fire, the orange light flickering in her eyes. "Does it matter?" "Only if it's still hurtin' you." Her throat tightened. "It is. But talking about it don't make it stop." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." The way he said it, without pressure, without judgment, made her chest ache. Most men wanted answers. Cole just wanted her to have peace. Outside, the coyotes sang to the moon, a lonely sound that somehow made her feel less alone. Grace stirred once in her sleep, then settled again. Clara watched the flames dance and thought how strange it was that safety could sneak up on you, that sometimes home wasn't where you were born, but where someone finally stopped asking you to explain why you're broken. Cole leaned back in his chair, gaze on the fire. "You've done this place some good, Clara." She blinked. "I just clean and cook." He shook his head. "You bring something more than that. Feels like the ranch breathes easier now." "Guess I do too." Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. No one had said anything like that to her in a long, long time. After a pause, she whispered, "Maybe we both needed Savon." Cole's eyes met hers across the glow of the fire, and for a moment, neither of them moved. The air between them was heavy with things unsaid, not promises yet, but the kind of hope that grows quietly when 2 hearts start to heal side by side. Outside, the wind rustled through the pines, carrying the scent of earth and dusk and something new, something that might just be love, if either of them dared to call it that. The first sign of trouble came not with a sound, but with a silence too deep for comfort. The kind of silence that makes even the horses raise their heads, ears flicking toward the ridge. It was late afternoon, the sun hanging low and red over Redstone Creek. Cole was chopping wood near the barn when Dusty, his old gelding, started pacing in the corral. The wind carried the faint echo of hooves, steady, deliberate, drawing closer. Cole wiped his brow and looked toward the trail that cut through the hills. One rider. Black coat. Moving like a man who had a purpose and the patience to see it through. Clara was on the porch, cradling Grace. She saw the rider, too. Something in her went still, the way a deer freezes before it runs. Cole noticed the change instantly. You know him? She swallowed hard. I don't know, but I think trouble's looking for me. He didn't ask for more. He just said quietly, get inside, Clara. By the time the rider reached the gate, Cole had wiped his hands, set the axe aside, and stood waiting. He looked calm, but the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. The rider slowed, dust rising around his horse's legs. He was lean, sharp-faced, with eyes that carried the hard miles of a man paid to find what others lost. Afternoon, he drawled. Fine spread you got here. You Cole Bennett? Cole nodded once. That's right. I'm looking for a woman. About yay tall, brown hair, travelin' with a baby. Have you seen anyone fit that picture? Cole's jaw flexed. Why you a skin? The man gave a thin smile. Ain't my business to explain. Let's just say there are folks in Abilene real eager to see her again. Cole said nothing. His silence stretched until even the wind seemed to wait. Finally, he said, ain't seen nobody fits that. You might try the next town over. The rider studied him for a long moment, eyes narrowing. Then he tipped his hat. Appreciate your time, Mr. Bennett. He turned his horse, but not before adding, if you happen to see her, tell her the past has a way of catching up. When he rode off, Cole didn't move for a long time. He watched until the dust disappeared beyond the ridge, then turned toward the cabin. Clara was standing by the door, pale as milk. He knows, she whispered. Cole shook his head. He suspects. That's all. Her breath hitched. Cole, if he goes back. He won't, he said firmly. He'll check the saloon, maybe the old mill road. We'll be fine. But deep down, he knew a man like that didn't stop just because the trail went cold. That night, after putting Grace to bed, Clara sat by the fire staring into the flames. The air between them was heavy, quiet except for the pop of burning wood. Cole finally spoke. You don't owe me your story. But if that man's comin' back, I need to know what kind of storm's riding with him. Clara's fingers twisted in her lap. It's not just me he's after. It's who I left. He waited. I was married, she said finally, her voice trembling. A man named Everett James. He was kind at first, then cruel in ways words don't cover. When I told him I was with child, he said the baby wasn't his. Said I'd shamed his name. I ran before he could make good on his threats. Cole's chest tightened. And that man today? One of Everett's men, no doubt. He sent bounty riders after me before. Said he'd rather see me dead than free. Cole's hand clenched around his cup. He'll have to go through me first. Clara's eyes shimmered in the firelight. You can't fight him, Cole. He's got money, men. Don't much care about that, he cut in quietly. Ain't the first time I've faced a man with more of both. But I ain't lettin' fear drive you out again. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. Why would you risk that for me? He met her gaze. Because I know what it's like to live with ghosts. I ain't lettin' yours take this place too. The words hung there, thick with unspoken feeling. Outside, the moon rose silver and solemn over the prairie, and somewhere in the distance a lone coyote cried. Clara watched the fire flicker across Cole's face, the same face that had become her anchor in this sea of running and hiding. That night, she didn't sleep much. Every sound outside made her start. But near dawn, when she looked over and saw Cole sitting awake by the door with his rifle across his knees, she felt something she hadn't felt in years safe. For the first time, she realized she didn't just want to survive. She wanted to stay. 3 days passed with no sign of the rider, and for a moment, Cole let himself believe the danger had ridden on. But peace in the West never lasted long. It was a visitor, not a resident. The morning it came undone, the sky had a strange color to it, pale and sharp, like steel before it breaks. Clara felt it before she heard it. That hum in the air, the way the world goes quiet when it's about to choose sides. Cole was out fixing a broken water line near the barn. Clara was washing Grace's small clothes by the creek when she saw the dust. 2 riders this time. Moving fast. Not the slow rhythm of travelers, the hungry pace of hunters. Her breath caught. She scooped up the baby, skirts dragging through the wet grass, and ran for the cabin. Cole saw her running before he saw them. Inside, he shouted, voice like thunder rolling across the plains. She didn't argue, just bolted through the door, clutching Grace tight. By the time she looked out the window, Cole was already standing near the gate, rifle slung in his hands, body still as stone. The riders slowed when they saw him, both men, hard-faced, with trail dust on their coats and purpose in their eyes. One of them was the man from before. The other wore a black hat and a badge that didn't belong to any law Clara trusted. Bennett, the first one called. We got questions need answer and dot. Cole's reply was even. Then ask M from where you are. The man spat into the dirt. You're harboring a runaway. A lady by the name of Clara James. You got her here, you hand her over, and we'll be gone before sundown. Cole's jaw flexed. Ain't nobody here by that name. Funny, the man sneered, because the boss says she took something that don't belong to her. Cole's finger rested just above the trigger. If he means her freedom, she earned that fare. The man's grin vanished. You best not play hero, Bennett. Everett James doesn't take kindly to thieves. Cole's voice went low and cold. Then he can come say it himself. The two riders exchanged a look. One nudged his horse forward. Don't make this harder than it has to be. You don't want to die protecting another man's wife. Inside the cabin, Clara pressed a trembling hand over her mouth, her breath sharp. The word wife hit her like a stone. Grace stirred in her arms, sensing her fear. Outside, the world went still. Cole's voice broke the quiet, steady, final. Boys, I've been dead before. You don't scare me none. The first shot cracked the silence apart. It came from the man in the black hat, a flash, a roar, and a bullet that tore bark from the fence post beside Cole. He dropped to one knee, fired back, and the air filled with smoke and thunder. One rider fell hard, his horse bolting. The other turned tail, firing wildly as he galloped back toward the ridge. When the smoke cleared, Cole stood panting, a thin line of blood trailing down his arm. He looked back toward the cabin, and Clara was already there in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Cole, she cried, rushing to him. It's just a graze, he said, voice rough, but steady. Ain't nothin' worth cryin' over. She pressed her hands to the wound anyway, shaking. He'll send more, she whispered. Everett won't stop. Cole met her eyes, and for the first time, there was no calm in his voice, only fire. Then he'll learn what kind of man he's comin' after. Clara's breath caught. You can't fight them all. I ain't fightin' them all, he said quietly. Just fightin' for what's mine to protect. Her heart twisted. You don't owe me that. He gave her a look that made the world slow down. You don't get to decide what a man owes when he's already chosen. She stared at him, the man who had taken her in without question, stood between her and death without hesitation. And in that moment, she realized something she hadn't dared to before. She wasn't running anymore. She was being defended. Not because she was weak, but because someone finally believed she was worth it. That night, after she bandaged his arm, Cole sat near the fire in silence. Clara laid Grace in her cradle, then turned to him. You shouldn't have risked yourself for me. He looked up, eyes tired but sure. You ever think maybe you're the reason I was still here to do it? Her lips trembled, but she couldn't speak. The crackle of the fire filled the room, carrying their silence like a promise. Outside, the prairie was quiet again. But in that stillness, something had changed, not the fear, not the danger, but the way they faced it. Together. And for the first time in a long while, the house at Redstone Creek didn't just feel like a shelter. It felt like home. The next few days passed under a sky that never quite cleared. Storm clouds rolled across the prairie like slow, watchful eyes, and every gust of wind felt like a warning. Cole mended fences, checked the trails, and set traps out by the ridge, not for game, but for men. He knew this wasn't over. A man like Everett James didn't send riders unless he planned to follow them himself. Clara tried to keep busy, but her hands trembled when she held a dish or folded a blanket. She could feel it, the air tightening, the piece thinning like glass before it breaks. Each night, she watched Cole by the fire, his rifle leaning against the chair, the same calm in his face that once made her feel safe, but now she saw the storm behind it. On the fifth day, just after dawn, The sound came again, hooves, not two this time, but many. Cole stepped out onto the porch and saw dust rising beyond the hill. 6 riders. One in front wearing a coat too fine for trail dust, black gloves, and a face that made the world colder just by looking at it. Everett James. He reined in his stallion at the gate, staring at Cole with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well," he drawled, "seems I finally found the man who thinks he can take what's mine." Cole's voice stayed calm, steady. "Don't reckon your name's on her, mister." Everett's smile widened. "You must be Cole Bennett. Former outlaw, ain't that right? Heard plenty about you. Funny thing, the law says you've got blood on your hands. Maybe I should have brought a marshal instead of wasting good men." Cole didn't blink. "You can talk all you want, but you're not talking her." Everett leaned forward in the saddle, voice dripping like poison. "She's my wife, Bennett. My property. And the brat she carries, that's proof of her shame. You really want to die protectin' another man's mistake." The words hit like stones. Inside the cabin, Clara held Grace close, her breath shaking. Tears stung her eyes, not from fear, but fury. Property. Shame. The words she'd lived under, escaped from, now echoed through the walls she'd just begun to trust. Cole's jaw tightened. "You're wrong about her," he said quietly. "She's not yours anymore. She's free." Everett laughed, cold and mean. "Free? Ain't no such thing for a woman who broke her vows. The world doesn't forgive whores, Bennett." Before he could finish the word, Cole moved. His rifle came up fast, not aimed, not wild, but deliberate. The shot split the silence clean. The bullet hit the fence post inches from Everett's boot, splintering the wood. "Next one don't miss," Cole said flatly. The other riders shifted, hands hovering near their guns, but Everett raised a gloved hand. "Easy, boys. Mr. Bennett here wants to play hero. Let him. The law'll take care of him soon enough." Then, turning that serpent smile toward the cabin, he called out, "Clara. You hear me in there? I'm feeling generous today. Bring yourself out now, and I might let the cowboy keep his skin." Inside, Clara's body shook. Grace whimpered softly in her arms. She stood there, heart pounding, torn between running, hiding, or facing what she'd run from. But when she looked out the window, saw Cole standing alone before 6 armed men, something inside her changed. She opened the door. "Clara, stay back," Cole warned, but she stepped out slowly, the wind catching her hair, the baby clutched tight against her. Everett's smile returned. "There she is. The runaway bride. I see you've been busy playing house." Clara met his gaze, no fear this time, only fire. "You call it runnin'. I call it survivin'. Everett sneered. "You made a vow before God." "I made a vow to a man who stopped bein' one," she said sharply. "You broke it long before I left." Cole's hand tightened on the rifle. Every word out of Everett's mouth was a fuse waiting to burn down to gunfire. Everett's smile thinned. "You think this man loves you, Clara? Wait till the law comes knockin'. He'll drop you to save himself." Clara shook her head slowly. "You don't know him." Everett's gaze flicked back to Cole. "Then maybe I'll teach you both a lesson." He raised his hand. 2 of his men dismounted, guns drawn. Cole didn't wait. The rifle cracked once, then again. One rider went down, the other staggered back, cursing. The air exploded into chaos, horses screaming, gunfire echoing across the plains. Clara ducked, clutching Grace, the world turning to smoke and thunder. When it cleared, 3 men lay still. 2 more galloped off into the hills. Everett sat on his horse, pale, furious, staring at Cole like a man who'd just seen the devil and realized he'd lost his bargain. "This ain't over," Everett hissed. "You hear me, Bennett? This ain't over." Cole reloaded calmly. "It is for you." Everett's eyes burned with hate, but he turned his horse and rode hard, leaving the dead and the dust behind him. Cole watched until he disappeared over the ridge, then lowered the rifle, his shoulders heaving. Clara stepped forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he said softly. "There are some evils you can't outrun. You can only end them." She stared at him, realizing that the man before her wasn't just a protector. He was the home she'd prayed for, the one built not from walls or fences, but from courage. And for the first time, she didn't feel like someone who'd been saved. She felt like someone worth saving. The next morning dawned pale and heavy. The air smelled of gunpowder and rain that hadn't fallen yet. Cole stood out near the edge of the property, burying the men who'd come with Everett. It was the right thing to do, even for enemies. Clara watched from the porch, Grace bundled in her arms. Cole moved slowly, deliberately, like a man carrying more than dirt. When he came back to the cabin, his hands were rough, his shirt streaked with dust, but his eyes, those steady gray eyes, were calm again. "It's done," he said softly. She nodded. "And him? Gone south, I reckon. Might lick his wounds a while before coming back, if he ever does." Clara exhaled shakily, the kind of breath that feels like the first in months. But her relief was tangled with guilt. "You shouldn't have had to do that for me." Cole leaned his rifle against the wall and met her gaze. "You keep saying that like I didn't have a choice. Truth is, I did. And I'd make the same one again." She looked at him, eyes glistening. "Why?" He shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "Because somewhere between that knock on my door and now, this place stopped being just mine. It became ours." Her throat tightened. The words hit deeper than any promise. They shared breakfast in quiet, coffee, bread, and the soft babble of Grace playing with a wooden spoon. The sound of her laughter filled the cabin like sunlight, and for the first time, Clara felt something close to peace. But peace in those parts was never free. By midday, a rider appeared down the trail, this one wearing the tin star of the county sheriff. Cole stood, every muscle going tense again. The man dismounted, nodding politely. "Cole Bennett." "That's right. Got reports of gunfire up this way yesterday. Townfolk said there were bodies on your land." Cole glanced toward Clara, who stepped closer but said nothing. "Self-defense," Cole said simply. "They came for her. One of 'em was workin' for Everett James." The sheriff scratched his chin. "That the fella out of Abilene? Heard he's been spreadin' talk, says you murdered his wife." Clara froze. "He what?" The sheriff's eyes softened. "Don't rightly believe him, ma'am, but talk travels fast. He's got money and influence. Word is, he's riding back with a court order to claim you and the child." Cole stepped forward. "Over my dead body." The sheriff raised a hand. "Now, easy Bennett. I ain't here to take sides. Just lettin' you know the man's stirrin' up dust. You'd best keep to your ranch a while." Cole nodded slowly. "Appreciate the warning." When the sheriff rode off, Clara stood silent, staring at the horizon. "He'll never stop," she whispered. "Men like him never do." Cole reached out, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll be ready. Ain't no paper or money stronger than truth." She turned to him, voice trembling. "You really believe that?" He looked at her long and steady, then said, "I believe in you." "That's enough for me." Her eyes filled, and for a moment she wanted to tell him everything she couldn't before. The nights she ran barefoot through the rain, the way fear used to live in her bones. But all she could do was whisper, "You shouldn't have had to carry my past." Cole smiled faintly. "Darlin', sometimes a man don't find peace till he carries something worth protectin'." That night, as the prairie wind whispered through the pines, they sat on the porch in silence. Grace slept soundly inside, the fire flickering through the open door. "I used to dream of a place where no one could find me," Clara said quietly. "But maybe I was wrong. Maybe I just needed someone who wouldn't let me run anymore." Cole didn't say anything. He just looked at her, the firelight dancing across his face. Then, slowly, he reached out and took her hand. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty this time, it was full of everything they'd fought for. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The sound didn't frighten her anymore. It sounded like life, wild, imperfect, but still going on. 3 days later, the sky over Willow Creek turned the color of tarnished silver, heavy, silent, and waiting. The air carried a stillness that made horses restless and men uneasy. Cole had been mending a fence post when he saw the dust cloud on the horizon. 4 riders. One of them, tall and proud, sitting straighter than the others, his hat clean, his coat tailored. Everett James. Clara stood on the porch, her arms tight around Grace. Cole looked up at her once, then walked toward the gate, his stride steady. The riders slowed, stopping just short of the boundary. Everett dismounted with a lazy grace that masked the venom in his eyes. "Well," he drawled, brushing dust from his gloves, "you've done well for yourself, Bennett. Cozy little homestead you got here." Cole said nothing. Everett smiled, though it never reached his eyes. "You've got something of mine, and I've come to collect it." Clara's voice carried across the wind. "I was never yours, Everett. Not by love, not by law, not by heaven." He sneered. "You were my wife. You ran from your vows and took what belonged to me." Cole stepped closer, voice low and controlled. "You're standin' on my land now. You'd best think carefully before you start claimin' people like cattle." Everett's expression hardened. He nodded to the man beside him, a federal officer with a rolled-up paper. "This here's a court order, Bennett. Says the woman and the child goes with me." Cole's jaw tightened. Ain't no paper stronger than truth. The officer unfolded the parchment, eyes uncertain. "You'd do best to comply, mister. We don't want trouble." Clara stepped forward, clutching Grace. "If you take me, he'll kill us before we ever see a courthouse." Everett laughed sharply. "You think I'd waste a bullet? You'll just live out your shame in my house, where you belong." The sound of that laugh hit Cole like a lash. He took one step forward, slow, deliberate, his boots crunching against the gravel. "You had your chance to be a man," Cole said quietly. "Instead, you became something worse than the dust under your own boots." Everett's smile faded. "Last warning, cowboy." Cole's hand hovered near his holster, but not for his gun. Instead, he held up the small silver locket Clara had left behind that first night, the one with a faded picture of Grace inside. "This is what you called yours," Cole said, his voice breaking just enough to show what it cost. "Ain't property. Ain't a prize. Just a mother tryin' to raise her little girl free." The officer looked between them, hesitating. "Sir, I don't." Everett's temper snapped. He drew his pistol, the movement sharp as lightning. Clara screamed. Cole's hand was already moving. 2 shots echoed across the prairie, one from Everett's gun, one from Cole's. Then silence. Dust drifted through the air like slow-falling snow. Everett stood for a moment, eyes wide with disbelief. Then he staggered, dropped his weapon, and fell to the dirt. The officer dismounted, checking the body, then looked up with a grave nod. "It was him or you." Cole's face was unreadable. Didn't want it to be either. He turned to Clara, who was still frozen by the porch steps, clutching Grace. He walked to her, his steps heavy, and wrapped his arms around them both. "It's over," he murmured. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's just beginning." The officer cleared his throat. "I'll make my report clear, self-defense. But it might be best if y'all stay low a while." Cole nodded. "We've got our ranch to tend. That's enough for us." When the riders left, the prairie was quiet again. Cole stood looking after them for a long while before heading back toward the cabin. Clara followed closely, her hand finding his. Inside, the fire still burned low, the same one she'd warmed herself by that first night. As they sat together, Grace asleep between them, Clara whispered, "You once told me some loves are worth fightin' for." "I didn't understand it then." Cole smiled faintly. "And now?" She looked into his tired eyes. "Now I do." The wind picked up outside, carrying with it the scent of rain, not storm rain, but spring rain, soft and healing. Cole leaned back, staring at the flames. "Funny thing about storms," he said quietly. "You think they're there to break you. But sometimes, they just wash the past clean." And for the first time since that knock on his door, they both believed it. 5 years later, the sun still rose the same way over Willow Creek, slow and golden, washing the world in the kind of light that made you believe in second chances. The ranch had grown. Fences mended, crops taller, a few more horses in the corral. But the real difference wasn't in the land, it was in the laughter that filled it. Clara stood by the porch rail, brushing dust off her dress as Grace chased a chicken across the yard, squealing with joy. Her curls bounced, wild and free like the prairie wind. "Grace Bennett," Clara called, pretending to scold. "That poor bird's gonna fly clean to Kansas tryin' to escape you." Grace giggled and ran to her mother's side, clutching a feather like a trophy. Papa says I'm faster than a tumbleweed. Cole's voice carried from behind them. She ain't wrong. He stepped out of the barn, hat low, a small smile playing on his lips. The years had lined his face with sun and work, but there was a peace in him now, the kind that only comes after you've lost nearly everything and found something better. Clara looked at him the way she always did, quiet awe mixed with the warmth of a love that had been tested by fire and found unbreakable. "You think much about those days?" she asked softly. He wiped his hands on his jeans, leaning against the fence. "Sometimes. Not the gunfire or the fear. Just the knock on the door." Clara smiled faintly. "You opened it. Best thing I ever did." She stepped closer, her hand brushing his. "You gave us a home, Cole." He shook his head gently. "No, Clara. You made it one." They stood there in silence for a long moment, watching Grace spin in circles, the wind catching her laughter like a song. Somewhere beyond the hills, a train whistle echoed, distant but strong. The world was changing out there, faster than the old ways could keep up. But for them, life had found its rhythm again, slow, honest, and full of the kind of love that doesn't need to be spoken every day to be real. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in amber and rose, Cole wrapped an arm around Clara and whispered, "Funny how the hardest storms bring you to the calmest places." She nodded against his chest. "And sometimes the loneliest roads lead you home." The wind rustled the grass, carrying their laughter out across the land, a promise kept, a life rebuilt, a story that refused to end in sorrow. In the heart of the Old West, some stories don't end when the dust settles. They live on in the people who choose love over fear and hope over hate. If you've ridden this far with us, don't stop now. There are more tales to tell of cowboys and wild hearts, of second chances and promises kept. Watch our other stories. A cowboy found a girl crying by the river. He said, "You ain't alone now." A wounded woman knocked on his door. He said, "Come warm by my fire." Saddle up, partner, 'cause in this channel, love always finds its way home. The fire crackled softly. The stars blinked awake. And under that gentler sky, their story finally found peace.